Hello everyone, welcome to CEO 360. My name is Rahul Sehgal and today we have our guest who is former CEO of Siemens Mobility UK, Willson. William has had a long and illustrious career in business world and we are thrilled to have him today to share some of his experience and insights with us. Thank you, William. Thank you for joining us today. It's been really pleasure.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you for asking me. I'm always happy to share my experiences. And so I'm looking forward to the conversation.
That's great. So let me begin by giving an introduction about William. William has over 25 years of extensive experience in rail industry. He has done work innovating digital products and solutions for enhancing passenger experience. William has also worked towards lowering down the end-to-end passenger cost. So, William, let me ask you a fundamental question about where you were born, how were your early childhood days looked like, followed by academics, and then the complete trajectory of working in Siemens Mobility UK.
Okay, so a little bit of my background. I was born just outside London in Surrey, but on the second day of my life, we moved to the northeast of England, to Tyneside, to Gateshead, and I grew up in the northeast of England, initially in Tyneside, then in Alnwick in Northumberland, which was a great place to grow up. Mm-hmm. And then latterly I finished my childhood in Lincolnshire. Mm-hmm. But since then I have been fortunate to work for essentially three major companies, and I've also had the opportunity to work extensively all over the world. I fell into rail effectively by accident. I was working for the overhaul of jet engines, commercial jet engines for the General Electric company, which I thought was a really sexy job at the time. It was great, traveling everywhere, airlines and everything else. Mm-hmm. And they said, oh, if you're interested in aeroplanes, you must be interested in trains. So therefore, we just bought this little company. Will you go and run it? And I thought, trains, no interest in those. Never used them, horrible things. So I thought, give it a go. It was a career progression. And as you say, almost 25 years on, here I am still in the rail sector of transportation, although it's widened a bit. And then with Siemens, I was acquired by Siemens. I was working for the small UK Invensys company, which was part of the old Westinghouse group, a signalling company predominantly. And they were looking for someone to buy them. And we were geared very much up to, looking for companies to either come into partnership with or to acquire us. Mm-hmm. And there were two. There was a Chinese company, there was Siemens, and there was a little bit of a competition between the two, and it ended up that Siemens bought us, which was a very good move, and certainly on a personal basis, gave me plenty of opportunities to move up from being in a signalling company, a UK, essentially, signalling company with 2 or 3 international outlets in Spain and Australia predominantly, into this multinational, huge business of the Siemens group, but also with Siemens Mobility, where, of course, being one of the manufacturers, one of the largest manufacturers of rolling stock, as well as signalling, and having the traffic side of things as well in the portfolio when we joined them.
Oh, that's interesting to know. So, can you please explain more of your professional journey and trajectory in Siemens? We could see from your profile that you have a wealth of work-related experience inside Siemens. And how did you convince the board that you are the right person to lead it in the right direction? And how colleagues also helped you in going forward?
Of course. When Siemens took over Invensys, I was working in a sales and commercial type position, UK focused, and we were going through and acquiring a large backlog in terms of the network rail frameworks for signalling, with looking at the control strategy. The traffic management system framework had just failed, and so what was going to happen there? And things were going fairly well. In the UK, we had a full portfolio. And it very much has been down to relationships as well as good performance with my career in Siemens. So it happened that I was actually having breakfast with the then head of the business for signalling, Michael Peter, in Braunschweig. And he said, well, how are things going? And I said, well, they're going incredibly well, but, I won't say it's getting easy, but I'm looking for the next challenge.
Yeah.
And so he said, well, I've got some international roles. Would you be interested in that? And I became the head of infrastructure sales globally, based out of Madrid, but actually spending either most of my time in Germany or traveling international. Following on from that, we had some great successes, notably in the contract for Norway, where it's the 100% of the infrastructure in Norway is being resignaled by Siemens with ETCS level 2, and it has a service obligation up to 2059. So a very large contract and the biggest signaling contract ever. And that then led me to actually be brought back to the UK to run the rolling stock business for only 1 year, after which I was promoted to be the CEO of the full group. So I must admit there weren't many job interviews there. A lot of it was about the network you have. But the way that Siemens work is they have a very effective network of people that are progressing well within their careers. There's a lot of training given. They have their own training academy south of Munich, and it fits together really quite well to promote people. And similarly, I, as the CEO and previously, were putting people into these courses in order to develop their own careers, which they'll follow my steps, I hope.
Yeah. Oh, that's nice. So, do you think in today's world, MBA is a prerequisite to become a business leader of any organization, or it's the inside training which really holds a value and importance, as you said?
It depends, and there is a difference between which company you're working for. Okay. Within Siemens, the academic achievements, because it's international, don't seem to be so important. Nice. I don't possess an MBA myself, but obviously I've done an awful lot of internal training, which brings me up to a Siemens level, should we say. Yes. I wouldn't say it's directly equivalent. But I know that others, perhaps smaller companies, would look for MBA as a prerequisite. But the interesting thing is companies like Siemens don't often bring external candidates in. So the MBA would have been taken, a few stages back in the career. Oh. So it's very much about actually the MBA plus the ability to, perform. And then I look around the industry and we have a mixture. Mark Thurston, for instance, who leads High Speed 2, and a really accomplished business leader, came up through an apprentice route. And as you may be aware, I'm a huge fan of the apprentice routes, having had our own training facilities and bringing people through degree apprentices, including MBAs, but also bringing through traditional apprentices, and also, military to rail conversions, and what we had called the a levers program, where people could take 5 to 10 years off for childcare or a change of career and come back in, and we would elevate them to the level that they would have been had they continued working. So there are many different ways to get through.
So MBA is not the only solution.
No, but it's a pretty good one.
Great. Can you talk about major difficulties you faced while your tenure as CEO, and how did Siemens Mobility UK approach innovation and technological advancements during your time?
Okay, big question. So, one of the problems with any business, but particularly here in the UK over the last few years with rail, has been the market. So, as many will be aware, there's been much talk about going away from the traditional arrangement that we see of an infrastructure owner and a rail operating companies and then rail ownership companies, the Roscoes, the Tocs, and Network Rail predominantly, and to go to one integrated solution, GBR, perhaps having the train ownership outside of the GBR. This has meant that there's been a slowdown in activity, particularly around the procurement of rolling stock, and this became a major challenge. Having convinced the board that they should invest in a sizable investment here in the UK to build a rolling stock manufacturing plant, to keep that full is a major challenge. There was a flagship order, London Underground, the deep tube, starting with Piccadilly line, which will keep it going for the first 4 years. But one of the challenges is what will go into it thereafter. There were options for 3 other lines of the deep tube order, but also we were looking very, very hard at commuter rail, and had hoped to secure high speed too. So the market was one of the challenges on the rolling stock side. Coupled with that, we had the infrastructure side, where we were or are in a predominant position with a large market position. Now, there are 2 reasons because of that. One is the ability to deliver. The signalling side, as it's known, of the industry over the last 15 years has a poor performance of delivering on time. Often possessions are taken for final commissionings and they overrun, and then there are problems that come with that, or reliability is not there. And what we did at Siemens very much was having a strategy to bring everything in-house. So we had control over it. So that would be the core, the R&D, the design, the testing, the commissioning. But added to that, the telecoms, the power, the SCADA, plus the civils design, the civils installation, and all the ancillary requirements that come with it, which meant that we had a really turnkey operation. And that gave us the ability to be flexible. Should something go wrong, we would be able to deal with it because we had the depth of the organization to do it and still deliver as expected. But that wasn't enough. Without doubt, technology plays a huge part, and the major part of that in recent times has been digitalization. The concept of digital signaling started a few years ago when we had the modular signaling initiative, whereby you would take a bespoke signaling scheme and you break it down into repeatable objects, effectively, or designs of junctions or trackside objects and so forth. And you would have a fairly basic digital program in order to bring these pre-designed data points together. But then this has moved forwards, and it's moved with the advance of ETCS into the concept of having a signaling system that has no trackside objects, so no signals. Purely has the points to change the control of the direction. This has led through to the driver becoming implicit in the signaling system. So all the commands from the interlocking go directly into the train, and this has been digitally enabled extensively here in the UK by work that we did in the R&D in the signaling business. And then one of our most recent advances was around the whole concept of traffic management systems and conflict resolution, and how to actually make sure that, you know, if there's something that goes wrong in the timetable, you have the right priorities given to the right trains, and then you actually perturbate any delay that may be happening. And we were very successful, starting in a very small way around Derby and moving then into York, and now being able to roll that out down the whole of the East Coast main line, connected with the ETCS and the resignaling there. But the digital side didn't stop just with signaling. One of the great successes has been in the concepts of availability and how you monitor a train to know what's going on with it and where it's going to go. The Class 700 Thameslink fleet, which are found north and south of London and through the core, is Siemens' flagship fleet for digital enablement. So it's a digitally enabled train. It's monitoring all of the key components on board, and it goes into a digital depot. So what do we mean by a digital depot? So this is a depot whereby it has a lot of automated systems. First off is, as you bring the train in, the wheels are measured automatically for their roundness, for the angle onto the track, and also for their overall size, to understand how their wear is and whether they actually need replacing, and any wheel flats are picked up at that stage. The temperature is taken of the bearings automatically to check that there's no issue going on there. And the brakes are measured automatically as every axle passes over it at a speed of 5 miles an hour. Once it gets into the depot, it will only be brought into the depot if there was a need for maintenance. So the concept of routine maintenance has gone out of the window. You bring it in when there's something that needs changing. Now, that could be something that's been picked up on the train management systems, could be something that's due to the life of a component that needs changing, or it could be something else, such as a variety of other bits and pieces. When it arrives, you'll find that the train has already spoken to the depot management system. Mm-hmm. The parts are already requisitioned out of stores. Each operative who's working on the train has a notebook, an electric or digital notebook, hard pad, knows exactly what needs to be carried out. And so it maximizes the amount of productivity we get and the availability of the trains. Mm-hmm. One of the interesting things about the Thameslink contract when it was let was that it has a very few number of spares. Mm-hmm. So availability is absolutely crucial to actually, making everything work and not paying the penalties on the contract. And this was one of the key ways of doing it. But added to that, in the London area, to build 2 new huge depots was not physically possible because there wasn't the land. Yeah. So the Hornsey depot in particular is 1/3 of the standard size that it would be for the number of trains it accommodates because of the way of working. So, a few examples of digital enablement.
That's nice. I till now have just heard about data centers. Now I'm learning digital depots. That's nice to hear about. How do you perceive the need for rail in UK EMEA regions and in emerging markets, given that in India, Siemens Mobility recently secured the single largest locomotive order, which is $3 billion, if I'm not wrong?
Yes.
Can you... So what is the vision you think that these countries should begin with a sustainable vision, or to provide electrification or hydrogen-enabled trains? What is the vision they should start with?
Absolutely. An incredibly interesting and wide-ranging question. I think overall, one of the key things that brings rail policy together is the concept of decarbonisation. Yes. To have a green solution, particularly for freight, but also for passenger movements. When we look at India, we also see that a number of new lines have been built. The Golden Triangle in particular has new high-speed trains, there are new dedicated freight routes, and this really gives an opportunity for the railways to make a huge difference, because all of a sudden you can run a service that had never been anticipated when you're on mixed use rails. If you come across to the UK and to Ireland to a degree, we're working on a railway that was designed in the 1850s. Mm-hmm. It was designed by multiple companies, and it was not designed as one network. Yes. Over the decades, it's been brought together as one decade and made a lot smaller. But it is still predominantly a passenger railway that tries to accommodate a little bit of freight. Okay. The fact that a freight route from Liverpool across to the East Coast to feed the Drax power station takes 3 days to travel a direct route of less than 50 miles indicates that freight is not a high priority. Okay. And there really is an opportunity here in the UK in order to improve the freight offering that we have. So you look at mainland Europe, and it's a slightly different picture, because we, a number of years ago, saw dedicated freight routes going between major ports, and these have been highly successful. It took a little while to go, but these have been coupled with dedicated yards to accommodate the freight, and there is a much stronger business case for taking bulk by rail rather than by road. Mm-hmm. Here in the UK, one of the huge activities that's going on is actually how do you get more train paths over the same amount of the infrastructure. Couple with that with the journey that is yet to really happen, where freight moves away from diesel, and we have a large opportunity coming, because with the advent of perhaps battery-powered locomotives, we see the whole introduction of more modern ways of running those locomotives, but also the whole train sets, the braking systems across the wagons, the acceleration profiles, and then with digital signaling and really clever planning, which is automated, it takes away the necessity to stop trains and restart them. Because if you have a 2,000-ton freight train, the power that is required to stop it and then to restart it, and the time taken to do that, is really cutting into its efficiency in order to move from A to B. So I think overarching, you have the global view of decarbonising here, obviously 2045, and other countries slightly earlier, some slightly later. That will only be successful if we enable it by either building new dedicated lines and increasing capacity. And again, back to the UK, one of the areas that is under, I suppose, pressure at the moment is to go from north to south. Freight capacity is finite as we stand today, and there is no more freight capacity to go from London to the Midlands, Birmingham, or even up to Scotland. And people often ask me, why are we building a high-speed railway? But actually, we're not building a high-speed railway. We're building a railway that goes quite fast, and it will be, world-class when it opens. But we're actually building a huge amount of capacity to go north to south. And what that capacity actually means is that we're taking passengers off the West Coast Main Line we know today, we're putting on to High Speed 2, and we're opening up more freight paths on West Coast Main Line. And that, coupled with enhanced signalling and enhanced commuter and sort of intercity services on West Coast, will mean that we have the capacity, hopefully, for the next 25 to 30 years. Although I'm still a little skeptical that it won't run out before then.
Okay, so I understood that all the other Europe regions work on introducing new models, but UK also work on retrofitting the old models.
Yes, of course. There is a move in the UK to look at retrofit. And what do we mean by retrofit? So we mean taking a diesel multiple unit for passengers and either converting that to hydrogen or to battery or to bi-mode. Now, on the face of it, this seems like it's good business. But at Siemens, we did extensive studies into what that actually meant. And what we found is the increased weight, particularly around putting batteries onto a relatively light DMU, meant that we had to upgrade the gearbox. The braking system wasn't fit for purpose, and we were upgrading the chassis. And so it's very difficult to justify the actual business case whereby the new upgraded unit could be coming in at 2/3 of the cost of a brand new unit, which would have built-in efficiency through all the digital systems it would have, and obviously it wouldn't be 25 years old. However, here in the UK, we do see a huge amount of midlife rolling stock that's being retired. Now, much of that is being parked in fields, and test tracks, and various other places. And the nature of the way that the rail is divided, with one entity owning the unit, another operating it, another owning the infrastructure, means that there is more of a business case to actually revamp those units. What we see in Germany, Switzerland, Austria is when a unit's life expired, that unit will be recycled, and they're looking very much for the most efficient running, the most power efficiency, the most availability, and the most reliability. And what we've seen, particularly in Austria, is a push towards going directly to battery-powered units, so they can really show that Vienna is going to be a major green hub as they move forwards, which is where Siemens had their first trials for battery trains. And we saw a whole new platform developed, which is transferable across most of Europe, but unfortunately not into the UK. One of the main problems with the UK and picking up designs for European vehicles, whether they're retrofit or brand new, is the gauging. Because what we see in Austria, for instance, is we put the battery on the roof and it raises the roof by half a meter, and it just simply would not work in this country. So.
Now it's all clear. Thank you, William. Last question for segment 1. Do you recall any amusing conversation you had in boardroom when you were confident that you were correct, but it was growing harder for everyone to believe in you, or harder for you to persuade them?
I can remember quite a few, yes. But I suppose a lot of it would be around the concept of modularized signaling. To me, who is not a signaling engineer, I can understand the concept, and my theory was just go and do it. And let's get a market edge, let's be the disruptor and go and do it. And then you would have those quite rightly pointing out that we have to really justify that it is safe, justify that we cover all the principles. And it wasn't so much telling me, and they were so diplomatic in the way they did it, that it can't be done, but it was just that it was a journey to get there. And the compromise was that we got there, just not in the time scale that I wanted to.
That's a good discussion there.
You can never remain complacent.
Okay.
Risk is an interesting concept. I'm never a huge fan of gigantic hierarchies.
Okay.
London has for many years been the centre of the commercial or the banking markets. Every station, about a year and a half, 2 years, with full housing developments. Is if you go back 20 years, the concept of taking a train to Paris, perhaps it's 30 years, was alien.
Exactly.
Now it's quicker to get to Paris than it is to get to most UK cities. So when I was young, the concept of going into rail was not very exciting.
Okay.
There were sexier areas to go into. But having been there for a long time, I think it's one of the best sectors you can go in. And if you're interested in coming into the rail sector, we actually need people like you.